Welcome, everyone. Today, we are diving into a fascinating chapter of evolutionary biology, Lamarckism. Before Charles Darwin and modern genetics, scientists were already trying to solve the puzzle of how life changes over time. This theory represents humanity's first major scientific attempt to explain evolution, and understanding it is crucial for appreciating how our knowledge of biology has grown. To understand our topic, let us start with a simple thought experiment. Imagine you decide to become a dedicated bodybuilder. You go to the gym every single day, lift heavy weights, and eventually develop massive, incredibly strong muscles. Now, imagine you have a child after achieving this physique. Would that child be born with massive muscles just because you worked out so hard? Today, thanks to modern genetics, we know the answer is no. However, in the early 1800s, people thought very differently. They genuinely believed that the physical traits you acquired during your lifetime could be directly passed down to your offspring. This brings us to the formal theory itself. Lamarckism, formerly known as the theory of the inheritance of acquired characteristics, was proposed by the brilliant French biologist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck in the year 1809. Why does this matter? Because before Lamarck, the overwhelming consensus was that species were completely static and had never changed since their initial creation. Lamarck bravely shattered this idea by introducing the concept that species do, in fact, change over time in direct response to their environment. He viewed evolution as a process driven by the continuous, purposeful striving of organisms to adapt to their immediate environmental challenges. Now that we know who proposed it, let us look at how it supposedly works. The theory rests on two primary, interconnected principles. The first is the principle of use and disuse. This states that if an organism actively uses a specific body part to survive, that part will grow stronger, larger, and more developed over its lifetime. Conversely, if a body part is not used, it will slowly weaken and shrink. The second principle is the inheritance of these acquired traits. Lamarck argued that whatever physical changes an organism acquires through this use or disuse will be genetically transmitted directly to its offspring. You might naturally wonder why we spend time studying a theory that was later proven wrong by modern genetics. Lamarckism is incredibly important because it was the very first comprehensive scientific theory of evolution ever proposed in human history. He laid the crucial, necessary groundwork that allowed later scientists, like Charles Darwin, to discover the true mechanisms of evolution via natural selection. Furthermore, his ideas have seen a slight, fascinating resurgence in modern science through the field of epigenetics, where environmental factors can indeed affect how genes are expressed in offspring. Understanding Lamarckism helps us deeply appreciate the scientific method. While Lamarckism is fundamentally a biological concept, we can represent his idea using a simple, intuitive mathematical model. This formula captures how a physical trait changes from one generation to the next. Let us look at the variables. P sub n plus 1 represents the physical trait, or phenotype, of the offspring in the next generation at birth. P sub n represents the initial physical trait of the parent at the time of its own birth. Finally, delta E represents the change in the trait acquired by the parent during its lifetime due to environmental use or disuse. If a parent acquires a positive change, delta E is greater than 0, and the offspring is born with a larger baseline trait. Before we move on, let us see this formula in action with Lamarck's most famous example, the long neck of the giraffe. Suppose an ancestral giraffe is born with a starting neck length of 1.5 meters. During its lifetime, it constantly stretches its neck to reach high leaves, acquiring an additional neck length of zero point 0.2 meters. We want to find the starting neck length of the second generation. We apply our formula, substituting P1 and delta L. Adding 1.5 and zero point 0.2 gives us 1.7 meters. Physically, this shows the direct inheritance of the parent's hard work, giving the offspring a significant head start in life. Now that we have the second generation's starting length, let us move forward in time to the third generation. The second generation giraffe also stretches its neck by 0.2 meters during its life. We take the starting neck length of the second generation, which we just calculated as 1.7 meters, and add the newly acquired length. This gives us a starting neck length of 1.9 meters for the third generation. Physically, this means that over just 2 generations of stretching, the baseline neck length of the species has increased by 0.4 meters. This step-by-step accumulation is exactly how Lamarck believed complex adaptations formed. Let us visualize what we just calculated. On screen, you see a sequence illustrating Lamarckian evolution. On the far left, we have our ancestral short-necked giraffe. Notice how it is actively stretching its neck upward to reach the leaves. This represents the principle of use. In the middle, we see that same giraffe later in life, having successfully elongated its neck through continuous effort. Finally, the arrow labeled inheritance of acquired trait leads us to the offspring on the right. This third giraffe is born with a noticeably longer neck right from the start. The diagram perfectly captures Lamarck's idea of evolution as a fast, purposeful, and highly directional process. We have seen how traits grow, but Lamarckism also explains how traits shrink. This brings us to our second scenario, the blacksmith's arm. Lamarck's theory applies equally to the principle of disuse. If an organ is neglected, it weakens, and that weakened state is passed on. To understand this, we will look at a village blacksmith who builds massive arm muscles through intense physical labor. Then we will look at his son, who chooses a life of study and never does physical labor, leading to muscle loss. We will track this muscle mass across 3 generations to see how traits can both grow and shrink under Lamarck's rules. To solve this new problem, we adapt our previous formula specifically for muscle mass. The structure is exactly the same. M sub n plus 1 represents the starting muscle mass of the offspring in the next generation, measured in kilograms. M sub n is the starting muscle mass of the parent. The crucial variable here is delta M, which represents the change in muscle mass due to use or disuse. If the parent works hard, delta M is a positive number. If the parent neglects their muscles, delta M becomes a negative number, which will decrease the baseline trait for the next generation. Let us apply this to the blacksmith and his son. The blacksmith starts his career with a baseline arm muscle mass of 30 kilograms. Through years of hammering hot iron, his arm muscle mass increases by 5 kilograms due to intense use. We want to find the starting muscle mass of his son, the scholar. We take the blacksmith's starting mass of 30 and add the acquired mass of 5. This gives us 35 kilograms. According to Lamarck, the father's hard work directly gave the son a physical advantage at birth. The son does not have to work to achieve this baseline mass. It is his birthright. Now, let us see what happens to the third generation. The scholar was born with 35 kilograms of muscle mass. However, he decides to become a scholar. never doing physical labor. This results in a muscle loss of 3 kilograms due to disuse. To find the starting mass of the grandchild, we take the scholar's starting mass of 35 and add the change due to disuse. Because he did not use his muscles, this change is a -3. The grandchild is born with 32 kilograms of muscle mass. This perfectly illustrates Lamarck's principle of disuse in action, showing that evolution can work in reverse, causing traits to diminish if they are no longer needed. We have covered the full scope of Lamarckism today. Let us review the key takeaways. Lamarckism was a pioneering theory proposing that organisms evolve by inheriting traits acquired by their parents. We saw how the principle of use and disuse dictates that traits grow stronger when utilized and weaken when neglected. We also mathematically modeled how these lifetime changes are passed directly to the next generation. While modern genetics has shown that our DNA is not altered by everyday physical activities, Lamarck's core idea that environments shape species was truly revolutionary. You now understand the crucial first steps humanity took toward understanding evolution.